Let's take a look at your top story this evening. You are watching the Weekend Prime here on ANN7 with myself, Stefanie Jansen van Veeren. Well, an ANC panel has once again reiterated the demand for more powers to the presidency. In the run-up to the policy conference in June, the ANC legislature and governance panel said the presidency must be given more control over the finances to ensure implementation of the National Development Plan.
Strengthen its capacity to govern as the leader of society. The ANC's policy document states that the presidency must be reconfigured to drive strategic coordination and resource planning in government.
The strategic center of power in the presidency must be strengthened to drive the implementation of the National Development Plan and also to align planning and policy, resource allocation and enforcement. The aim here is to improve the alignment and integration of policies and development across the spheres and sectors of government.
To do this, the document suggests that Presidential Commission on Provinces be established to review the alignment of powers of functions of all spheres of government. The legislature and governance policy documents also acknowledges that the state's institutions still require transformation in order to meet the needs of South Africans.
Our view is that as you engage in these processes, particularly as you sit in opposition benches, that you have different responsibilities. The first, of course, is to defend the gains of transformation. We think that it is important that we continue to defend the gains of transformation, that we continue to articulate the agenda of transformation in whatever position that we're sitting in, whether in government or in opposition benches.
Although some of the SOEs are troubled by governance challenges, there are processes underway to empower the general public to hold SOEs accountable, among others.
Consultation and finalizing of the governance and oversight protocols for SOEs is underway. This will focus on how to empower the public to hold SOEs accountable, how legislatures play their role in tightening oversight, and the executive taking full control in managing their portfolios of the SOEs.
The paper also suggests that the institutional structure of parliament be strengthened with new political offices necessary to fully execute the mandate. The ANC says it's concerned with the high level of corruption in the country. It plans to consult extensively with civil society and key role players to ensure that corruption is eradicated in the country. Pamato, ANN7, Johannesburg.
Well, joining me in studio, I have Professor Sipho Siepe, a political analyst, Obed Bapelang, NEC, a member rather, and on the phone line we do have Mandla Simelane, who's also a political analyst. We will be discussing this further. Well, a very good evening and welcome to ANN7. Thank you so much for joining us. Firstly, let me ask you, what was your reaction to the policy discussion document on government? So do you think that the correct pressing issues were discussed, or is there anything else that you thought they should have touched upon today?
No, you need to read it beyond simply the press statement, and what you discover is quite a number of issues that have been raised. One is a recognition that the state has a role to play, but also they start from the prescription or almost the suggestion and direction that comes from the NDP, that the ANC will not be able to achieve socio-economic transformation unless the state is capacitated. So what the NDP anticipates is a state that is able to respond, that is agile, that listens, that is able to effect transformation and also to deal with some of the ills that we've seen in the last few years. For instance, one of the things that come out strongly is the issue that is now embedded in government of ensuring that the public servants do not do business with government. So that is number one. There's the issue when you deal with capacity of the state. The document talks about the professionalization of the public service, that unless you have professionals, you're going to have a problem. Then there are issues that have been almost endemic in the system that have to do with governance. Those are also addressed. Then there's an issue that you guys were running with about capacitating the presidency further, but most importantly, to locate the presidency as a strategic center in government, because we have had a tendency where some ministers were projected as if they are superior to other ministers. So what the document does, it tries to correct that. There are some people who had also assumed that the Treasury is the one that runs government. But what the Treasury is presented, like all other departments, is really that once the ANC has put out its agenda that has been supported by the electorate, it has a mandate, and the president must be seen to have the wherewithal in terms of resources, financial and human resource, and also planning, to be able to push for that mandate. So overall, you could see that there is a thrust. And of course, once you start reading it, there's mention of the National School of Government, what role it needs to play. So one must read, understand what is happening, not only from the press conference, but must read the entirety of the document, because there are quite a number of issues that are directives. So I would say the one that you guys ran with is one that has more been in the media space, where the president, at times he was presented as if he's a lame duck president. But what the document says is that we're actually looking beyond the President Zuma, because these policies are not going to be effected right now. They're only going to be effected after. So people must read this as something that the ANC says, as we govern and as we make mistakes, we get into some corrective measures.
We are going to get into that strengthening of the presidency a little bit later. Let me just go across to you, Mr. Obed. What was your first reaction to what happened and what they have discussed? And do you think it was the correct issues? Also, do you think there was other pressing issues that they should have focused on more?
Well, I was part of the press conference today, and as Professor Sipho Siepe says here, that we need not only look at the statement itself, we need to look at the entire passage of the legislation and governance. There are quite a number of issues raised there, including the unresolved issue of the number of provinces in South Africa, and whether, KwaZulu-Natal, for example, one region is already proposing that we must get rid of all provinces. And yet the document says we need to reduce provinces to 4, and they're saying all must go, so that then the power and the resources goes closer to where the people are in an attempt to ensure that people's power is realized in the system of governance. And therefore, and the other issue obviously which Professor has not raised is the issue of the traditional leaders. Where do you put them and locate them in the system of governance, in a Republican system, in a system of democracy? And obviously we are now engaging as ANC within a team that is led by the Treasurer General, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, and I'm part of that task team, and Minister Nkwindi as an NEC member is also part, with Contralesa aside, to engage on issues that they are raising. One is the powers. They feel that they don't have powers, and the ANC policy is not saying anything about them getting powers. And they are raising it quite strongly, and they will be sending delegates to the ANC conference too. But before the conference, we want to have visited certain provinces where we're going to meeting with the grassroots traditional leaders themselves to also get the views and the feelings, so that then we could then come up with a package, having engaged with Contralesa to say their view going forward is the following. But we'll engage them around what the NDP is already prescribing, that South Africa will be 80% urbanized by 2050. So traditional system, where does it get space and articulation in an urbanized environment? And urbanization is integration of people, different cultures coming together, and people who are now beginning to see a notion of a new nation emerging in this particular system. Now, if you are going to then run traditional councils in a manner of an old way, it will never fit in. And we need then to adapt them or settle them like the way the British have settled their own kinships or queenship, how the Netherlands have settled, how Denmark did, and then where it becomes symbolic, heritage, and then with a particular space that is not in governance. Yes, there were government in the past, but then we have now all accepted a democratic system, all of us. And I think the traditional leaders were part of the ANC in 1912. In 1906, they were part of those who says, let's establish a national movement. In 1987, O.R. Tambo even came and say, let's establish Contralesa. But yes, let's listen to what they have to say and we'll be meeting them very soon in a week's time at government level, but the ANC will also be engaging them towards the policy conference.
Thank you. Let's go across to the phone line now. Mr. Mandla Simelane, political analyst, is joining us. Good, very warm welcome to you, Mr. Mandla. Let me ask you a question. We have spoken about this in studio. We've touched upon it, Professor Sipho Siepe and myself. But the strengthening of the presidency in order to implement the NDP in a more fluent way, do you think that it is a very good idea? Do you think that it will actually bring the ANC closer to the people once again?
I think for me it is fundamental. The president cannot be strengthened without ensuring that the ANC itself is united. The ANC itself is in command, and it's the one that is supporting the presidency to take those critical decisions as we go forward. So for me, it is critical that firstly, the ANC as a governing party needs to strengthen itself so that it's able to give adequate support. Because if you were to note that whatever decision the government takes and proposes, members of the ANC in the branches are at the center on a day-to-day relation with the people of South Africa to say this is the direction that the government is taking, and as members of the ANC and branches, we are driving this direction so that the presidency then becomes itself strengthened. And you'll see then if the branches of the ANC are functioning properly, you then see then lesser cases of these violent strikes in our communities. But also, having said that, one has to acknowledge that the policy document that has been produced by the ANC is a very compelling and a comprehensive account of, firstly, at the level of analysis and identification of challenges, and also of the proposed solutions that the country needs to take as a direction. But also, we also need to ask ourselves, why have we failed, firstly, with the previous policies, your RCP, your GLIA, your ASGISA, and currently, with NDP, you see that there are a number of challenges that are emerging. So it'd be highly interesting to see that how the ANC then manages to resolve also its own internal division so that it is able to govern in a manner that is with authority.
Well, let's come to studio again to the ANC NEC member here in studio with me, Mr. Obaid Bapela. How will the strengthening of the presidency actually help in enabling the ANC to align the policies and develop the sphere so that it can flow better or work better?
Well, I agree with Professor Simelane now, as he said, that the unity of the ANC is very critical in the environment. But in addition, I think there's a document also, the organizational document, which is now beginning to look at the re-engineering and the remodeling of the ANC as part of the proposals going to the policy conference. And it says that the NEC members should not all dominate the cabinet. So they are putting a limit that if you are in the NEC, it does not automatically mean you'll end up becoming a minister or a deputy minister. And there must be a percentage where whoever is the president must know that once you reach that point, you can no longer appoint, so that the ANC has a pool of NEC members who are not in government, who can remain critical, who can then begin also to ensure that whatever is the policy of the ANC, if it's not articulated or implemented in the government space, they are free to then engage and then critique. But currently, we're almost 80 or 90%, all of us, in the cabinet, we're both players and referees, and we can then begin to manage and manipulate issues in a particular way. So the ANC, therefore, is weakened at this particular level. The ANC must also root itself within the branches, within the provinces, so that the pool of NEC members that are not going to be in government will be spending time building a strong ANC on the ground and ensuring, therefore, that we empower even the branch members to then begin to understand the policies and then the ideology of the African National Congress.
Well, unfortunately, we have to bring the discussion to an end now, but thank you so much for joining me in studio. That was Professor Sipho Siepe, who is a political analyst, and Obaid Bapela, who is the ANC NEC member here in studio. And on the phone line, we had Mandla Simelane, who's also a political analyst, just talking more bit about the policy discussion documents on governance.